The warning had been translated into 14 languages, broadcast across 6 quantum bands, etched into the diplomatic memory of the Galactic Council, and somehow, it still became a joke. Captain Elias Rook found out it had been mocked when a laughing alien meme drifted across his console, tagged accidentally into a shared military channel. A stylized human skull, cartoonishly small, sat beneath bold galactic script that roughly translated to, "They bark loudly for a species with no bite." The sender was unknown, but the emblem in the corner told him everything: Nigma Empire Naval Intelligence. Elias leaned back in his command chair aboard the Terran exploratory cruiser TNS Wayfarer, and exhaled through his nose. "Well," he muttered, "that's not ominous at all." Around him, the bridge hummed with the quiet efficiency of a ship never meant for war. The Wayfarer was technically a science vessel, sleek hull, modular labs, a coffee machine that broke more often than the hyperdrive, and exactly 2-point defense cannons that had never fired in anger. Humanity had sent her to the edge of map space with a simple mandate: observe, document, and politely remind anyone curious that Terran borders were not empty. The reminder had been sent 3 standard cycles ago. "Captain," Lieutenant Marachin said from navigation, spinning her chair slightly toward him. "Long-range sensors are picking up mass distortions again. Same signature as before." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Nigma? Unless someone else builds dreadnoughts shaped like flying cathedral knives," she replied dryly. "Then yes. Nigma." At the science station, Dr. Oren Vask, a civilian astrophysicist with perpetually disheveled hair and the social awareness of a startled ferret, looked up from his data pad. "Statistically speaking, this is fascinating," he said. "They were explicitly warned not to enter this region. The probability of them doing so anyway suggests either extreme confidence or extreme stupidity. Those aren't mutually exclusive," Mara said. "The situation would have been funny if it weren't terrifying. The Nigma Empire didn't scout with probes or diplomats. They scouted with fleets. According to Council archives, they specialized in rapid annihilation followed by posthumous apologies that no one was alive to receive. And here was the Wayfarer, floating at the edge of Terran-claimed dark space, with a crew of 47 and a standing order not to provoke anything." Elias tapped his comm. "All stations, this is the captain. We're entering yellow alert. That means no panic, no heroics, and yes, engineering. You're finally allowed to reroute power to something other than the espresso machine." A chorus of acknowledgments followed, including one disgruntled sigh from engineering. The unusual part, the part that would later be replayed in military academies with a mix of disbelief and laughter, was how the conflict actually began. The Nigma fleet didn't open fire. They hailed them. The holographic projector shimmered to life, resolving into the angular, multi-eyed visage of Enigma commander. His mandibles flexed in what council linguists had once described as a smug approximation of a smile. "Human vessel," the alien said, voice modulated into something almost pleasant. "You are trespassing in unclaimed space. Power down and prepare to be boarded." Mara blinked. "Did he just say unclaimed?" Dr. Vask snorted. "Oh, this is already better than my thesis defense." Elias stood, straightened his uniform, and stepped into the hologram's field. "This is Captain Elias Rook of the Terran Stellar Union. This region was formally claimed and clearly marked 3 cycles ago. You were warned. Turn back now." The Nigma commander tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "We reviewed your warning. Our analysts determined it was performative." That word landed heavier than any threat. "Performative?" Elias repeated. "Yes," the commander continued. "Your species is young, loud, fond of dramatic language. Total consequences, absolute response, do not cross. Such phrases are common among cultures attempting to inflate perceived power." Behind Elias, Mara mouthed, "Oh, that's bad." "You have one final opportunity," the alien said. "Comply, or be erased." For a heartbeat, the bridge was silent. Then Dr. Vask leaned forward and whispered, "Captain, are we allowed to laugh?" Elias didn't, but something cold and steady settled into his chest. The warning hadn't been bluster. It hadn't been a threat meant to scare. It had been a promise backed by things the galaxy had never bothered to understand about humanity, things buried in classified archives, contingency protocols, and a cultural habit of preparing for worst-case scenarios with almost obsessive creativity. He met the Nigma commander's gaze. "We already gave you your final opportunity," he said quietly. "This ship is not what you think it is." The alien's mandibles twitched. "You are a science vessel." "Yes," Elias agreed. "Which means we've been studying you." The channel cut. "Captain," Mara said, fingers dancing over her console. "They're deploying drones. Hundreds of them." "Of course they are," Elias replied. "Because why listen to the warning when you can test it?" He took his seat as alarms began to rise in pitch, not shrill yet, but climbing. The stakes were no longer theoretical. If the Wayfarer fell, it wouldn't just be a loss of ship and crew. It would be proof that humanity's borders could be laughed at, crossed, and erased. Elias allowed himself one grim smile. "All right," he said. "Let's show them what happens when humans stop being performative." Somewhere beyond the hull, the first Nigma drone crossed an invisible line in space. And the consequence, though no one on that bridge fully understood it yet, had already begun. The first drone didn't explode, it vanished, collapsing inward like a thought suddenly forgotten, and that impossibility snapped every human on the bridge to full attention. Mara swore under her breath as sensor data cascaded down her screen. "Captain, it didn't register as destroyed. It just stopped existing. No debris. No energy spike. Nothing." Dr. Vast's eyes were wide, almost reverent. "They crossed a map probability boundary," he said. Oh, this is beautiful." Elias didn't look away from the tactical display, where a neat formation of Nigma drones was advancing, unaware that one of their number had already been erased from the universe's accounting books. "Beautiful later," he said. "Explain now." "The boundary," Vast continued rapidly, fingers flying over his console, "was part of the warning. We seeded this region with observational physics experiments, micro-singularities, quantum mirrors, causality knots. Harmless unless interacted with incorrectly. The drone interacted incorrectly." Mara glanced back at him. "You're telling me we turned empty space into a minefield made of bad math?" "Yes," Vask said proudly. "Very bad math." The second drone vanished. Then a third. The Nigma formation faltered, breaking cohesion as their control algorithms tried, and failed, to compensate for losses that didn't follow any combat logic they understood. "Captain," Mara said, voice tight, "the Nigma fleet is accelerating. They're not retreating. They're angry." Of course they were. Species that built empires on overwhelming force rarely paused to reconsider when force failed. They simply applied more of it. On the tactical display, the distant silhouettes of Nigma warships bloomed as weapons systems powered up, energy signatures flaring like hostile suns. Elias exhaled slowly. So much for them laughing it off. The first long-range strike came seconds later, a coherent beam meant to shear the Wayfarer in half from several light seconds away. Instead it bent. Not deflected, not blocked, bent, curving gently as if space itself had grown tired of straight lines, then looping back toward its point of origin. The Nigma's ship that fired it never had time to broadcast confusion. The beam returned home, carving through its own emitter array and detonating its forward hull in a silent bloom. Mara stared. "Did we just weaponize geometry?" Elias allowed himself a thin smile. "No. We weaponized curiosity." The Nigma fleet erupted into motion. Ships scattered, firing wildly now, saturating the region with enough energy to sterilize a small system. Each shot triggered a different consequence. Some vanished like the drones. Others ricocheted at impossible angles. One particularly unfortunate cruiser fired a missile that emerged from hyperspace inside its own hangar bay, with predictably catastrophic results. On the bridge of the Wayfarer, the mood shifted from tension to something dangerously close to awe. They don't understand the environment, Vask said, voice trembling with excitement. Their models assume space is passive. We learned the hard way that it isn't. And they're adapting, Mara warned. Slowly, but they're pulling back their heavy hitters. Switching to sensor sweeps. That was the real danger. Once the Nigma Empire understood why things were going wrong, brute force would give way to analysis, and analysis was something they were very good at. Elias nodded. Then we don't give them time. He tapped his console, opening a secure channel that hadn't been used in decades. It wasn't a weapon command. It wasn't a distress call. It was a release. Across the dark expanse of Terran-claimed space, systems that had been dormant woke up. Research platforms shed their civilian disguises. Navigation beacons shifted frequency, their true purpose finally revealed. What the galaxy thought of as a quiet buffer zone was, in reality, a layered experiment in deterrence, built by a species that assumed someday someone would ignore the warning. Captain, Mara said softly, we're getting incoming transmissions. Priority channels. Multiple Nigma vessels. Elias didn't answer immediately. On his screen, the tactical picture had changed again. The Nigma fleet was no longer advancing. It was hesitating, formations uneven, command and control flickering as localized pockets of impossible physics tore through their coordination. Put one through, he said at last. The hologram flickered to life, resolving into a different Nigma, older, scarred, his eyes no longer amused. Human captain, the alien said, voice strained. This region violates multiple galactic accords. You have turned space itself into a weapon. Elias met his gaze. No. We turned it into a message. You will stand down, the Nigma commander snapped. Or this will escalate beyond your comprehension. Something like humor touched Elias's eyes. With respect, he replied. It already has. Behind him, Dr. Vask whispered, almost to himself. They still think this is the trick. The Nigma commander leaned closer to the hologram, mandibles flaring. What are you? Elias didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch, long enough for another Nigma ship to blink out of existence on the tactical display, long enough for doubt to begin gnawing at an empire that had never doubted itself before. We're the species, Elias said finally. That assumed you wouldn't listen. The channel cut again, but this time, it wasn't arrogance that followed. It was fear, spreading through the Nigma fleet as they realized the warning hadn't been theatrical. It had been instructional. And humanity was just getting creative. The moment the Nigma fleet stopped firing was far more terrifying than when they had attacked. Silence, in deep space, carried weight. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that came when predators paused to reassess prey that had just bared unexpected teeth. On the Wayfarer's Bridge, every officer felt it, a tightening in the chest that no alarm could replicate. Mara broke it first. Captain, they're reorganizing. Full tactical convergence. They've stopped reacting and started thinking. Elias's jaw tightened. That was the line they had hoped never to cross. The Nigma Empire didn't win wars through panic. They won them through cold, methodical adaptation. And now, finally, they were treating humanity not as a nuisance, but as a threat. Dr. Vask's fingers hovered over his console, less exuberant now, more precise. They're mapping the anomalies. Not directly, indirect inference. Loss patterns, causality gaps, probabilistic shadows. They're building a model. How long until they understand the space well enough to bypass it? Elias asked. Vask swallowed. Minutes. Maybe less. As if summoned by the admission, the tactical display flared. A Nigma capital ship surged forward, not firing, not scanning, but jumping, short-range hyperspace hops that skipped over the worst of the distorted regions. Crude, dangerous, but effective. They're brute-forcing probability, Mara said. Sacrificing ships to carve a path. One of the dreadnoughts emerged half a light second closer than it should have, its hull scarred but intact. Its weapon arrays rotated toward the Wayfarer, glowing with power far beyond anything they'd deployed before. Elias felt the old, buried instinct rise. the one humanity had carried since it first learned to throw stones. The instinct that said, if this doesn't stop them, nothing will. "Captain," Mara said quietly, "that shot will punch through every passive anomaly we've set up." Elias nodded once. "I know." He opened another sealed channel, this one deeper, older. It had been written by people who never expected to be thanked and hoped never to be needed. "Execute contingency atlas," he said. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then space screamed. Not audibly, not in any way a non-human would have recognized, but every sensor on the Wayfarer went white with data as reality itself seemed to stiffen, like a muscle flexing for the first time. The region ahead of the advancing Nigma ship solidified, probability collapsing into certainty with brutal force. The dreadnought fired. The beam struck and stopped. It didn't deflect. It didn't bend. It hit a wall that had never existed before, a planar slice of enforced causality that simply refused to allow the energy to proceed. The beam piled up against it, feeding back into itself until the weapon overloaded. The resulting detonation tore the dreadnought apart from the inside. Every Nigma ship froze. On the bridge, no one spoke. Dr. Vast's hands were shaking. They're seeing it now. The full structure. We didn't just seed traps. We built a framework. A scaffold, Mara whispered. For war. The Nigma response was immediate and desperate. Multiple capital ships charged their drives simultaneously, not aiming to fight within the region but to burn through it, to overload the constructed physics with sheer mass and energy. Elias stood. They're trying to collapse it. Can they? Mara asked. Yes, Vask said grimly. Eventually. It'll kill them, but it'll tear the region apart too. Elias looked at the display, at the converging icons of an empire willing to destroy itself rather than accept a boundary. This was the moment the warning had been built for. The moment when misunderstanding gave way to defiance, and defiance demanded an answer that could not be ignored. Open all channels, he said. Mara hesitated only a fraction of a second before complying. The Wayfarer's signal went out, not as a threat, not as a plea, but as a broadcast layered with the same enforced clarity they had imposed on space itself. This is humanity, Elias said, voice steady, carrying across fleets and frequencies. You believe escalation will save you. You believe destruction is a language we fear. The Nigma ships continued to charge, drive screaming. You are wrong, Elias continued. We learned restraint because we mastered excess. We learned limits because we exceeded them first. He glanced at Vask. Release the archive. Vask pressed a single key. Across the region, ghostly projections bloomed, data echoes, historical imprints, simulations of extinct worlds and shattered fleets. Not Nigma. Others. Empires that had once made the same choice. We did not build this to kill you, Elias said. We built it so we wouldn't have to. The first of the charging Nigma ships crossed the final threshold. And space closed its fist. The ship didn't explode. It didn't vanish. It froze, locked in a perfect moment of halted motion, every particle suspended by the same unyielding certainty that had stopped the beam. One by one, the others followed, an entire vanguard arrested mid-attack like insects in amber. The Nigma fleet broke. Not tactically. Not slowly. Instantly. Ships spun, fled, misjumped, anything to escape a battlefield where even intent could be weaponized. Their formations dissolved into chaos, discipline shattered by a realization no empire survived intact. They had not been outgunned. They had been outgrown. On the Wayfarer's bridge, the tension finally broke, not into cheers, but into something quieter, heavier. Mara exhaled. They're running. Elias closed his eyes for just a moment. No, he said softly. They're learning. And that, he knew, was far more permanent. The retreat wasn't clean, dignified, or even especially fast. It was frantic, uneven, and riddled with self-inflicted losses as Nigma's ships tripped over one another trying to escape a region that now felt less like space and more like judgment. On the Wayfarer's bridge, The tactical display slowly emptied. Red threat markers stretched into distant vectors, then winked out as surviving vessels fled beyond sensor range. The ones frozen in halted reality remained, suspended monuments to a single, catastrophic misunderstanding. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mara let out a shaky laugh. "I can't believe that worked." Dr. Vask slumped back in his chair, hair sticking up worse than usual, eyes bright with exhausted disbelief. "Worked?" he echoed. "Mara, we just rewrote deterrence theory. Entirely. I'm going to need a new word for what that was." Elias remained standing, hands resting on the edge of the command console, watching the frozen ships rotate slowly on the display. Victory sat uneasily in his chest, not because it had been uncertain, but because it had been inevitable the moment the warning was ignored. "Status," he said quietly. Mara straightened, professionalism snapping back into place. "No incoming fire. No pursuit. Long-range scans show Nigma emergency beacons activating on the outer edge of the region. They're asking for assistance." Dr. Vask blinked. "Assistance?" "Yes," Mara said. "Medical. Recovery. Negotiation." Elias closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "Patch it through to Terran Command. And prepare a response." "You're going to help them?" Vask asked, incredulous. "We warned them," Elias replied. "We stopped them. Now we show them what the warning was for." As if summoned by the decision, an incoming transmission request appeared, encoded, formal, stripped of all earlier arrogance. Elias allowed it through. The Nigma commander appeared again, but this time his posture was different. Mandibles slack. Eyes dulled not by fear alone, but by comprehension. "Human captain," the alien said. "We acknowledge your claim. We request terms." Elias studied him for a moment. Not as an enemy. Not even as a rival. But as something rarer, a survivor of a lesson. "The terms are simple," Elias said. "You will withdraw fully. You will relay exactly what happened here, without embellishment, without excuses. And you will remember that the warning was not a threat." The commander hesitated. "And the ships you have imprisoned?" "They will be released," Elias said. "When your fleet is gone. Slowly. Safely." "Why?" the alien asked. A faint, almost tired smile touched Elias's lips. "Because annihilation was never the goal. Understanding was." The transmission ended. Behind him, the bridge crew exhaled almost in unison. Hours later, as the last Nigma vessel slipped beyond the boundary and the frozen dreadnoughts were gently eased back into motion, disarmed, escorted, and very much humbled, the region of space began to change again. Not back to normal, but quieter. The enforced certainties relaxed. Probability breathed. The Wayfarer drifted forward, alone once more. Dr. Vask stared at his screens, already recording data with the reverence of someone who knew history would be written from this moment outward. "You know," he said softly, "they're going to call this the most decisive engagement in modern galactic history." Mara smirked. "Involving a science ship with a broken coffee machine." Elias chuckled, the sound low and genuine. "Especially that." He turned toward the viewport, gazing out at the dark expanse that had so recently been filled with impossible violence. Humanity had not won because it was stronger, or louder, or crueler. It had won because it had planned for misunderstanding, and chosen restraint when annihilation would have been easier. That was the part the galaxy would struggle with. "We'll be studied," Mara said. "Feared." "Yes," Elias agreed. "But also listened to." He straightened, squaring his shoulders. "Send the final message." Mara raised an eyebrow. "To the Council?" "To everyone," Elias said. The broadcast went out on every band humanity had access to, simple and unadorned. Terran borders remain in place. No changes. No expansion. No retaliation. Just one final line followed. "The warning still stands." As the Wayfarer turned back toward home, carrying a crew that would never quite see space the same way again, Elias allowed himself one last thought, quiet, almost amused. The galaxy had laughed at the warning. It wouldn't make that mistake twice. And humanity, resilient as ever, went back to exploring, hoping the next ones would listen first.